Okay, hello everyone. On behalf of the Victorian team and the Institute of Architects, I'd like to firstly welcome everyone today for the lean-in. Today is called Delivering Sustainable Outcomes, Learning from Major Transport Projects. I'll just see if Alexis, you can turn your camera as well and say hello to everyone. There you go. Okay, so my name's Nick Bournes. I'm a Victorian chapter councillor and the chair of the Large Practice Forum. I'm also director of NH Architecture. It's my honor to actually host you today for this and be the moderator for this lean-in session. Today, we're joining you from all across this country, and so we'd like to acknowledge, and with deep respect, acknowledge the traditional owners of land on which we're all on. We acknowledge that it's a privilege to stay in this country, walk in the footsteps of those before us, and pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Today's lean-in session will be recorded, so if you miss anything today, don't worry about it. You can jump onto YouTube, spend your evening with a glass of wine, and have a look at it again. The YouTube channel will be released the next couple of days, so you can't do it tonight, but you can in a couple of days. This lean-in session enables you to ask questions of our panelists, or in fact, this time of Alexis, moderated by myself. There's a Q&A box down the bottom. Click in that, and those questions will appear for us on our screen, and we'll either answer them if there's something sort of procedural, or we'll hold them to the end if it's a question for the speaker. And if they've been dismissed, don't feel left out or aggrieved. It just means it's duplication of another question, and we will ask it. Okay. Today's session, the presenter is Alexis Davison. She's the Executive Director of Engineering and Program Services for the Major Road Projects Victoria. And sorry, Alexis, that's a mouthful. She is industry leader in infrastructure in a sector with extensive experience in all stages of project delivery. She's inspired by the challenge to build sustainable transport infrastructure and was instrumental in establishing the ecologic program, an initiative aimed at optimising the use of recycled and reused materials across Victorian infrastructure projects. So today she's going to discuss with us the Victorian major transport projects and what they're doing to drive greater use of recycled materials, reduce carbon emissions, and support the adoption of sustainable practices throughout that work. So let's welcome Alexis to our lean-in. Alexis, it's great to have you.
Thank you, Nick, for the intro, and hi, everyone. As Nick said, I'm from Major Road Projects Victoria, so we are responsible for the delivery of all the road projects that you see under construction across the state of Victoria. We are responsible for the North East Link project, the Westgate Tunnel project, and the major arterial road upgrades that you see around the place. And as Nick said, I lead the ecologic program here at MRPV. And I'm here to talk to you today about some of the detail about the program and what we're doing in terms of striving to build more sustainable infrastructure. So we have two main focus areas at MRPV, and sustainability generally and decarbonisation is a focus for us, and the ecologic program. So with respect to decarbonisation, we've got a strategy that we're preparing for the whole of the Major Transport Infrastructure Authority, which is the general sort of umbrella term for the delivery agencies that are building Victoria's big build, which include level crossings and rail projects and the like. And so we've got $100 billion+ program that we're delivering, and we're really trying to use that infrastructure spend to achieve some really good outcomes in terms of sustainability. So what is ecologic? So it's a Victorian government initiative. We really set the program up to focus on the use of recycled and reused materials, contributing to Victoria's transition to a circular economy. We can play a massive part in reducing waste and contributing to, the broader Victorian government sustainability strategy, which is called Recycling Victoria, which has a whole heap of initiatives. So we sort of set the program up in late 2019. And one of the first things we did was to write the Recycled First policy. The policy requirements are fairly simple. There are only two: optimise the use of recycled materials and report on the commitments that you make when you bid for major transport infrastructure projects. The policy has been in effect since March 2020. So any new procurement for major transport projects in the state of Victoria, it's mandatory to respond to these policy requirements. So we ask our contractors to prepare recycled first plans. And in those plans, they have to make commitments about the use of recycled materials. Once they make those commitments, we put it in their contracts and get them to report on that for the life of the project. And it's giving us a really rich data set about the health of the supply chain and the recycled supply chain. The reason why we chose the word optimise is very, very deliberate. We didn't say maximise, we didn't say meet these targets. We used the word optimise because we really didn't know what was going on out there. And we know that materials were being used, but we didn't have any comprehensive data set to suggest that we understood whether permitted quantities in specifications were being maximised or not. And so really we didn't want to sort of set the market up to fail. So we chose the word optimise. In the plans that we ask our contractors to prepare, we're asking them to tell us why not, if not, why not. So is it too expensive? Could you not find it? Is it inferior? Does it not meet the required specification? Will the asset owner not take it? And that's giving us a really good set of information to sort of go and pull the levers that we can pull from inside government, whether that be update a specification or work with an asset owner to demonstrate technical durability or performance. And it's, you know, it's really made the use of recycled material much more intentional from the outset, instead of being like an add-on later where, you know, someone has a great idea, but they're already in a contract, they've got a deadline, they've got a price, they don't want to take any risks. And so then good ideas sort of don't happen. And so it's really changed the way we think about recycled content. So since the introduction of the policy, the uptake of recycled materials has doubled. We didn't even change the rules yet. We haven't really written that many new specifications or changed too many specifications. We just have spent a lot of time educating our project teams on what is possible. That photo there that you see is our Sunbury Road upgrade for anyone that lives in the northern suburbs. They've used about 30 different recycled products on that project that, you know, would not or may not have been explored had the policy not applied. So it's really encouraging that, like, the consideration of the materials is happening from the outset at the very start of a tender process, rather than once a contractor is awarded a contract. So priority materials for us. So this list is from the Sustainability Victoria, and they've got a 2023 sustainability materials investment strategy. It's a bit of a mouthful, but, you know, not surprisingly, it's plastics, rubber, organics, textiles, glass. You know, the problem waste streams, plastic particularly, is of interest to us, and, you know, we're exploring every possible idea that we can use plastic in our infrastructure. The rubber is a bit tricky. Car tires are difficult to process. Organics is problematic in landfill, and we do a lot of landscaping as part of our road projects. So we're trying to understand how we can use more recycled organics. And I'll take you through a few examples in the next couple of slides. For anyone that lives in the southeastern suburbs, this is the Mordialloc Freeway. These noise walls are 570 tonnes of post-consumer plastic. This was a massive leap forward for the use of plastic in infrastructure, and I've been criticised for making them brown, but that was very deliberate. So we worked with the contractor and the Department of Transport for a couple of years There's now an Australian specification so that you can look on the Austroads website and get the spec for noise walls. These the specification permits up to 100% recycled content. In Victoria, before this, the specification for noise walls was very prescriptive and said you must make noise wall panels from timber, steel or concrete. And we were sort of like, well, why? Why do you have to specify the material? We should specify the performance. So if it attenuates noise and you can clean graffiti off it and it doesn't fall over in the wind, who cares what it's made out of? So we worked with a supplier, local supplier in Melbourne, to develop a product, went through a whole heap of technical testing, and now noise walls with 100% recycled plastic are permitted in Australia. These ones here have 75% recycled content. And the reason why they're brown, they were intentionally designed to look like the Corten steel ones that you see around the network. This project had been the subject of an EES, an Environment Effects Statement, and it had been through all of its approvals, all of its urban design approvals. And so we asked the supplier to mimic the look and feel of the steel, the Corten ones that you see around the network. St Kilda Road bike lanes. So we've got, for anyone who's been up and down St Kilda Road between the city and the St Kilda Junction recently, you would have seen new bike lanes. These curbs are 80% recycled material. It's glass predominantly. This was quite a successful project because this part of St Kilda Road is protected under the EPBC Act. It is a significant heritage overlay on St Kilda Road because of the boulevard nature, and bluestone curbs are the only thing that is generally considered in these areas. So we worked with the City of Melbourne and the supplier to develop a product where they added some pigment to sort of give it a little bit of a bluestone look and feel. So it's pretty significant to get approval to install these in that location, and having something that's 80% recycled content rather than concrete, massive carbon benefits, as well as using a waste stream in something valuable. eMesh is another cool product. So eMesh, recycled plastic replaces the steel reinforcement. So the picture on the left that you see there is, you can see the little plastic filaments poking out of that lump of concrete. And the picture on the right is the finished product. So it's 100% recycled plastic. It's processed in regional Victoria. It's packaged in Ballarat by an NDIS supported workplace. There's no steel in the concrete. It's massive carbon benefits. It's using waste plastic, and it's supporting social enterprises and disadvantaged cohorts with jobs in regional Victoria. So it's a really great story. We've been working hard with local government. A lot of the shared user paths, it's not approved for use in trafficked areas, but in all the shared user paths and pedestrian areas, it's increasingly business as usual. So local government, councils, no one wants to inherit a product that they don't understand, and they're going to have to maintain it for 50 or 100 years. So we have to work hard to demonstrate that these things are, we can demonstrate durability, and that it won't become a maintenance headache, and that it has a life as long as a virgin alternative. So that's increasingly business as usual. I can't think of a project recently where we haven't used eMesh. This is a pretty cool Deer Park station. This is a product called Polyrock. It's 95% soft plastic packaging, and it's used in concrete as an aggregate replacement. And a really interesting use of this product has been the roof of the Deer Park station, which the level crossing removal project is delivering. So that's just another interesting use of a waste material in the roof structure, it can be added to other things as an aggregate replacement as well. And obviously, you know, there's carbon benefits and using waste. Sleepers, this has got a massive, I guess, potential to create a really huge sink fund for waste plastic if we can get this to work. We're currently working with the Monash Rail Institute of Technology, Sustainability Victoria and Duratrack, which are the supplier of this product. The soft plastic goes into these. They're currently approved for use in sidings and stapling yards and low speed environments. And what we're working on now is what do we need to do to evolve the product to make it suitable for use on the high speed rail line. I think to date there's about 14 or 13 or 1400 sleepers have been procured for various low speed environments for some of the rail upgrade projects going on around the state. But we really want to see these on the main line. Traditionally, sleepers have been timber or concrete. So having recycled plastic has a massive environmental benefit. It creates a place for like millions of tons of plastic to go. There's like 12 million sleepers or something on the Victorian network alone. And they get replaced sort of, I think timber ones get replaced every 10 years and concrete ones generally every 20 odd years. So there's a massive kind of, you know, consumption of materials to sort of maintain the rail network. So that'll be really exciting if we can get this one approved for use. Coffee. This is really cool. So the picture on the left is someone emptying coffee. They go around to cafes around Melbourne, collect the coffee grounds, mix it with topsoil. The picture on the right where you can see the grass, that's got coffee in it, and where you can just see no grass, that has not got coffee in it. So 10% of coffee mixed in the topsoil is creating a really good environment for our landscaping to thrive. And like I say, every single road project has an element of landscaping. So we're trying to work with every single product that we can think of. We're avoiding landfill. We're doing the cafes in Melbourne a service because, you know, they're getting their coffee collected and they're not having to dispose of it. So, and this is a social enterprise as well, which, you know, ticks a few more boxes. We've used about 60 cubic meters of coffee recently, which is about 250,000 lattes worth, I'm told. So, you know, anything that avoids something going into landfill is a win for us. This is the Pound Road West upgrade. So we just built a bridge over the railway down in Melbourne's southeastern suburbs. We've done a trial in recovered carbon from old used car tyres as an additive to asphalt. So there's a section of this project that has recovered carbon black, as it's called, in the pavement, and we'll keep an eye on that over the next year or so, and then work with the Department of Transport to get that sort of approved for use if it stacks up. The rest of the project was the asphalt came from Alex Fraser. They've got a brand, Building Greener Roads, so they use a lot of recycled asphalt products in their mixes, and we tend to buy a lot of asphalt from them, as you can imagine. I don't even know how much asphalt the big build might consume in a year, but it's a lot because every single project has a road. So plastic, we've got some plastic conduits on the left there. So that's anytime we build traffic signals or need electrical cables or any kind of conduit, they're 60% recycled plastic. It's increasingly popular for our contractors to use these conduits. The picture on the right, they're drainage pipes. They're made from milk bottles and shampoo bottles and post-consumer plastic. The good thing about plastic under the ground, you don't really have to worry about UV or any kind of stabilizers because it's not exposed to the sun. So we can be a bit more creative with the uses of plastic if they're going to be buried products. We've got to date probably about 12 kilometres of drainage pipes that we've installed across our road and rail projects, which, you know, you could get from Brunswick to St Kilda or something like that. The plastic pipes on the right, they're 100% recycled content. We've got one supplier in Victoria and we're working with a second. So that's actually pretty positive. We're working with the department at the moment to get them approved for use under carriageways. At the moment, we're only allowed to put them, you know, in the verge or along longitudinally, not under the trafficable carriageways. So we're trying to get that changed. One of the things we've done alongside the policy is educate our teams. We've developed a knowledge hub, so it's an extranet platform that we can grant people access to, where we've got tools and templates and information. And one of the things we did early on is trawl through all the specifications to try and understand what was permitted, what was classed as an emerging product, what's sort of approved but less common, and really try and educate people on what was permissible. If we went out to our project teams and said to the project manager, you know, do you know how much crushed glass you can put in asphalt? No one knew, because, I mean, specs are dry at the best of times, but people just keep doing what they've always done rather than sort of go back and really challenge the norm. So we're trying to work out ways that were really easy to educate our teams on what they could do. And that, you know, this has been a really critical part of the success of the policy. And, you know, we've just got various visual guides, and you can see, you know, reuse of old sleepers, cement replacement in concrete. And so you can go to these and just look, you know, depending on what your project is. Obviously, these are all sort of built structures. Train stations are probably the only things that we build out of the ground. But it hasn't been all smooth sailing. We're still hearing a lot that, you know, recycled materials are inferior. One of the things that we've been trying to do with our project teams is try and get them to think about a recycled alternative as a different product. It's not like for like replacement. A plastic drainage pipe is never going to behave like a concrete drainage pipe. It just isn't. So you need to handle it and install it differently. And some of our contractors have had a few failures, but it's not because of the product, it's because of the handling and the installation. So we really need to teach our teams how to do things differently with the recycled alternatives. Everybody complains about standards and specs, but no one reads them properly. So a lot of the challenges and barriers with specs and standards, well, a lot of them are perceived. And when you point out to people that you're allowed to do 20% of this or 10% of that, they quite often go, oh, right, okay. And then they're prepared to entertain the idea. But some of them do have barriers, like the noise wall one that I was talking about earlier. So we're trying to push for a more performance-based approach to specifications in Victoria to, you know, if you can demonstrate that your product does the job that it's supposed to do, why would we worry about what it's made out of? Consistency with trials and testing. So every different asset owner, rail is particularly challenging. We build a lot of assets. We give them to VicTrack, we give them to council, we give them back to the Department of Transport. Everybody's got different views and approaches on how to test and approve products for use. So we're working with all of the asset owners to try and sort of introduce some consistency and help suppliers who've got a new product navigate. I mean, government's hard from the inside. God knows what it feels like from the outside, but navigate that approval process. And product availability is definitely a thing in our regional areas. When we were writing the Recycled First policy, we were building the Echuca-Moama Bridge up across the Murray. Local suppliers, not that extensive. And, you know, we didn't want any perverse outcomes from crushing glass in Melbourne and driving it up to Echuca just to tick a box. So we're sort of working with our suppliers to understand, you know, could you temporarily take a glass crusher to Echuca for the life of the project and collect the local glass and use that? So there's some really interesting things. There's some things happening in Falls Creek like that, where they take a glass crusher up there for the ski season and use the crushed glass in the asphalt that they use to do the maintenance in the summer season. So those sort of circular examples are really, really important. You save on emissions from transport costs. So not all of these challenges and barriers are real. Sometimes they're perceived. And so we just have to keep chipping away at it. And then where to from here? So we want to really take the policy beyond transport, I guess, is the ideal goal. And see what we can do in other areas. The government builds a lot of infrastructure, and there's a lot of opportunity to incorporate recycled material. And I think what we found in the last few years is that there are so many ways to incorporate waste into infrastructure and attach value to it so that it doesn't end up in landfill. And the Recycle First policy has been critical in acting like a catalyst to sort of force change and change people's thinking and make it more intentional. And with carbon and, the state of the planet, God knows we could do with every little bit to help. And that's me.
Sorry, I got stuck on mute. Alexis, thank you. That was excellent and really, deeply thought-provoking. And I'd say incredibly progressive. A lot of really big challenges there that you spoke about. We've got some really good time for questions today, which is good because you managed to cover an awful lot of content within a 30-minute element. So I'm very impressed by that. I might have to get some tips from you. But first, we've got some really quite detailed questions in the chat, but I might come to those in a minute because we do a bit of time. First, I was listening to a lot of the points you made, and I've got a few points maybe just want to noodle out a bit further that might elicit some more questions also. I guess one of the things I thought was really interesting, or two of the bits that, you refer to the policy a lot, and I guess that maybe that might answer the question of, it sounds like the key to this has really been implementing these ideas at the inception point of projects. Yes. In a way, getting around the pushback of, I guess you put it, people keep doing what they have always done, which is very true. I guess that's your way of getting around that piece, is by saying, well, you're not allowed to, because that's not even the conversation we're having. Has that really been the breakthrough, do you think, in changing it, from 5 years earlier?
It definitely is. I don't know what it's like in your world, but our contractors do things because you penalise them or incentivise them. And, if there's an abatement, they'll pay attention. And if there's an incentive to be had, they'll chase after it. And so, the successes that we see in some of the, all the government procurement policies, there are targets or mandates, or you must do this, or, you have to spend 1% on social enterprises. So having a policy requirement gives you a bit of a lever to sort of say, you got to do this. And that's why we chose the word optimize, because we wanted them to think about it and be intentional, but we didn't want to set them up to fail. So we're working with the market to sort of get better. But yeah, the policy's definitely been the catalyst for change. Because, it doesn't matter what the contractors say, they don't do things for the love of it.
No, everyone needs a carrot, and I joke about it with my 4-year-old. Like, oh, you don't bribe them, like life is a bribe. But that's okay. I guess
it's reality.
It's reality. So I guess the extension of that piece, however, was I was thinking, I guess, have you, and these two questions are probably linked, so I'll say them together. A, how do you deal with pushback? And B, have you found that pushback has actually been dealt with largely because you've actually started to change the supply chain by the demand your projects create?
Yeah, and it depends on who's pushing back. Sometimes if it's bureaucrats, they're just a bit fearful of the unknown and, risk adverse. So a lot of the time we spend demonstrating why a product is suitable for use, or why it does meet durability or longevity performance requirements. We support contractors to do a lot of testing. So providing evidence to people to make them feel confident that they're not taking a big risk has been a big part of it. But a lot of the time people aren't resistant, they're just ignorant, you know, and then so that sort of education, a lot of people are prepared to entertain an alternative product, but they just don't think of it because they just keep going, you know, like the way they've done things for 20 odd years. And, you know, like the example with the pipes, we had a disaster where all the pipes got like, they fell to pieces because someone drove over them before they had enough cover on them because they thought it was a concrete pipe and they're just not used to working with different materials. So the most resistance we get are from, you know, people that are going to inherit the asset to maintain for the next 50 or 100 years, and they want to make sure that it's not going to fall apart tomorrow and it's going to be my problem.
Yeah, I guess that's probably, and then we'll go to the questions, and this one I talked to cover them, is that this is the problem slightly of new products, is that they don't have the back catalogue yet of the lessons learned, failures, successes. And is that something you have to spend a lot of time working through?
Yes. And so like trying to amass data about where recycled material is in the Victorian network, it's been impossible because no one was counting. And so there was recycled stuff being used, but no one knows where it is anymore because it's not recorded. So you can't really go back 10 years, you know, 15, 20 years and say, oh, look, it's still there and it's fine. So we've started collecting a lot of data, and that's where we're sort of getting a bit more rigorous about keeping records about, you know, the carbon black trial at Pound Road. We know exactly where it is from here to here. And we can go back and look at it every year and see if it's fallen apart. And then so can the Department of Transport, who will ultimately inherit that project. So having data, I mean, data is key to a lot of things, but yeah.
Yeah, I think in policy, evidence-based research is the way forward. It's the way to really prove something up.
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting point you're making. There's a couple of quick questions. So what I choose, I might try to run through a few of them. I've got a heap more I could throw at you because it's a really interesting topic and presentation, but I'll do my job. Firstly, one question that was quite good at the start, the very, very start, because I guess everyone likes to ask the pointy question in the opening, was who pays for the increased costs and maintenance and management of these roads, which I think you've talked about a lot. I might let you talk.
I'll dispel the myth. They're not always more expensive. So this is a misconception that we bump into a lot. And the other thing I'll say is that every new product, probably ever, has been expensive at the start of its life, and then as it becomes increasingly common, the premium sort of drops away. So it's a myth that a recycled alternative is always more expensive than its virgin counterpart. It's just not true.
That also comes back to supply chain. You have to create a need to create a supply chain sometimes. Like you have to be the big build.
That's right. And our role is really to say, if you can make it, we will buy it. You know, if you can make it and it complies with the current specifications, we will buy it. That's the message.
Great. One of the questions is quite specific, was asking about if we can have more road lanes on the Frankston to Moorabbin. From Frankston to Moorabbin, I feel like that probably sits outside your policy purview.
You probably have to ring your Department of Transport representatives for those sorts of things.
One of the ones that was interesting from design perspective, the question was asking about, you know, the noise walls, you had to make them Corten looking, but that would mean that they inherently incredibly flexible because they could be any color.
I mean, we could rip them all down and recycle them into something else tomorrow. They're 100% recyclable as well. So, and because they're panels, they're sort of 1 meter by 3 meter panels. If one gets damaged, you can just replace it very easily. And the Department of Transport now owns the mold. It's sitting in a warehouse in Carrum. If they need another panel tomorrow, they could just like make it very, very easily. But, you know, you can make them any color, any texture, any shape. They just got to make a mold, and then they just spin it, heat it up.
A bit like precast concrete.
Yeah.
But plastic, recycled.
Yes, exactly.
Those molds all exist too.
They're lightweight, they're safer to install, they're faster to install. You can fit heaps on a truck because they're not concrete.
And it seems that actually ties into Tom's question. Tom asked the question, he said, how has circularity been incorporated into the approach for recycled materials? And obviously, like the e-mesh, I think that's something obviously you talked about it from the noise walls, but I guess it'd be also to understand, like, you know, things like e-mesh going into concrete. Does that make recycling that concrete any easier than traditional, or much the same?
It's easier because you don't have to separate the steel. So if you wanted to use it as crushed rock in the future, it would be very, very easy to do. And, recycling concrete, disaggregating steel and concrete, it's just a process. It's not impossible, but it's just a process. So it's one step that you don't have to go through if you wanted to recycle it at the end of its life.
So to extend that, is that something when you're doing your spec, obviously the policy talks to it, when you're doing your specification things, do you dive into that level of thinking to say, well, actually, we need you to also talk about how this could be. So when they're doing their spec, they're saying, yes, it meets your current specs, but also this is the end of life process for our product.
When we started, we didn't. We were just trying to get as much, what was waste. We were trying to assign value to waste. As we've matured over the last few years, we are actually turning our attention to recyclability of the product and the lifespan of the product. And, we're thinking about things like, if a recycled alternative lasts for 20 years, not 40 years, is that still okay because you're avoiding landfill and knowing that you're going to have to make two in the lifetime of one of something else? That's probably still okay, as long as you're going into those sorts of things with your eyes open. So we're starting to think about that, the longevity of a product or the recyclability of the product. And, pretty much anything plastic can be recycled quite a few times before it can't. It does run out eventually, the life of plastic, but most of the time we're building things with 50 or 100-year design lives anyway. So chances that it's going to get recycled anytime soon, it wasn't the highest priority, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think I'm trying to not jump around too much for those who are following along with us. People have asked, and I might link these two questions because they're sort of asking about, obviously, are there any concerns when using plastic in terms of like melting point of that? So like the limitations of the material, I suppose, is one of the questions. And the other thing that was really interesting that people were asking about, it's certainly true in, as I understand, is that soft plastic recycling is basically stopped. It stopped in New South Wales, and Victoria obviously doesn't, as far as I understand, have any activity either. So is this sort of the sort of only avenue currently available for that type of product?
The guy making the sleepers is actually, he's really interesting because he makes the netting that you see on orchards and vineyards.
Yep.
And then he collects it at the end of the season and they're going in the sleepers. So he's got a nice little circular thing going. He's also got a noise wall prototype, which has got a completely different methodology on the go. But soft plastic, like Close the Loop, that was a bit of a blip because there's a product called Tonoplast that was using some of the Close the Loop soft plastics in it, in the asphalt. I don't think soft plastics will be, someone will collect them again in the near future. I'm confident that a red
and not stick them in a warehouse.
And not stick them in a warehouse. And the more that we can create demand for stuff, the more people will pay attention to where their stuff goes.
Excellent. I'm sorry, I'm taking my eyes off you to read questions, of course. That's
No.
always the host's challenge. Got to rub my stomach and tap my head. So Marie Emily asked a question around talking about incentives. Is there an appetite to include KRA, KPI relating to recycled targets and more generally targets into the new MTIA contracts?
Targets are for recycled content are a little bit fraught for reasons that I feel like I sort of said, geographic challenges, availability. So targets are not my favorite. In the MTIA, we've got a new delivery model where we've set up panels of contractors and we procure differently. We have a performance pool attached to the contract. 15% of that performance pool, which is cash, is available to you if you perform on your sustainability commitments. And the sustainability commitments are energy reduction, emissions, and fuel emissions and recycled first plans. So if you meet or exceed the commitments that you sign up to in your recycled first plan, you're eligible for a bonus. We don't necessarily say targets because I don't think we're mature enough in our understanding of data, and like we don't know if you're allowed to put 20% of something in a product. We don't know if every single contractor is exploiting that 20%. We have no idea because we don't have the data. So maybe in a few years' time, we'll be confident to set targets, but not right now. And our new MTIA contracts do have incentives for sustainability.
And I guess speaking of geographic and incentives, a question that we has been asked. I think it's important. Obviously, you're representing Victoria here, and obviously we're a national event. So I guess the question has been asked is, are there, and it's specifically been asked around New South Wales, is there a counterpart? Do you have a counterpart in New South Wales organisation that you know of?
No, we don't, unfortunately, but we're happy to take calls on behalf of New South Wales people. We are connected to other jurisdictions through various forums, and we are talking about decarbonisation, which New South Wales is streets ahead of us on. And we're feeding into them our sort of ecologic recycled material information. So we are talking to other states and territories, but as far as we're aware, no one else has got a policy or a program like this.
It's interesting, and that links into another question was around, have you qualified the carbon footprint? Because you saw it, decarbonisation, they're ahead of it, and so that's a very good lead in. And if we have quantified it, are there any lessons learned or surprises from that?
Not for every product. Like we're sort of relying on the claims of the supplier and sort of the QA processes. Separately to that, though, we are exploring carbon calculators and ways of demonstrating and making carbon something that we consider at the business case stage. So looking at the footprint and choosing option A or option B, and carbon being one of the factors that helps us decide between option A and option B. So increasingly we're trying to calculate carbon, but it's a bit ad hoc at the moment, our understanding of the carbon benefits of various products. So
that feels like that has a
It's on the
synergy across
list.
the network. And that probably isn't unique to your bit of part of the sector. Certainly in the building sector, it's similar. We rely deeply upon trade information to understand the impact, because it's very hard to find a way, project by project, to quantify that. The metrics just aren't, and the skill set to collect metrics aren't there yet. I would feel. And this, I'm going to tie someone's question to one I actually had, because someone said, "Oh, are these specifications available for council use?" And I guess my question that might bounce off that, and this might take a little bit to answer, but we've got some time, was you sit within a government department using big build money. It's a very big pot of money, although it has to go a lot of places, so it probably doesn't feel very big when you're using it. But a lot of the people, especially on this call, will work in the private sector where there is no government incentive. So it really is relying on pressure, or at least in some ways ascribing a value to this within that project. How would you recommend teams doing that can get support?
We are the state government and we do have a lot of money, and we share our specifications with local government. A lot of the local government across Victoria, the 79 councils, almost all of them would use the state specs. I know Tasmania and South Australia also use the Victorian specs. So if we change something here or demonstrate something here, it sort of has a bit of reach. In the private sector, that's a tricky one, because I'm not really that familiar with how your contract structures work and what sort of incentives clients are putting in to things that you're responding to. But carbon is huge, right? And everybody has to take notice. So demonstrating carbon emissions has to matter to all clients, private or public, I think. I don't really know how you incentivize, when you've just got a private client, and I'm not really sure what the answer to the question is. But
just to help out on that, I think maybe it's actually about, like, how do you dispel myths with that client? Because often the pushback will be like, "Oh, that's too hard," or "That doesn't work," or "That's never worked." Are they, can those clients, is there like within your department or your industry, is there like a reach out and go, "Okay, no, I'm going to put you in charge of this person, and that person will talk to you about how they've done it, and it isn't actually a problem"?
Oh, we're happy for anyone to reach out to us. And like I said, we've got our knowledge platform, which is, it's not a free access website, but if people email and ask to register, we can add them to the list. So we're more than happy to share anything that we've learned along the way, or any products and our views of them. We're more than happy to share. On the Knowledge Hub, we've created a supplier map. So you can look at the map of Victoria and go, well, I want plastic pipes. Where's the nearest supplier? And you can find, someone to buy them from. We're more than happy to talk to people about our experience. I just don't know how, I mean, if we can help, we'll help.
That's great. That's exactly where I was going. Look, your acoustic barriers have really captured everyone's attention, so I'll pull these through So there's some questions around, how do they perform in comparison to traditional, so ply or concrete. Another question is, are they available outside Victoria?
I reckon the people making them in Carrum Downs would be happy to make them and supply them to anywhere. I'm not aware of any suppliers outside the state of Victoria, but I haven't looked for them, so I'm not saying they don't exist. The specification is an Australian specification, so they are permitted for use in every jurisdiction. I can't remember the number of the Austrade spec number right now off the top of my head, but it starts with a 4. They are, they should be permitted for use in all jurisdictions. The manufacturer in Carrum Downs is the Pact Group.
Great. And if they want more information, they can again reach out. So, yep. Well, that seems to be a good rhetoric to continue this. Let's have a look. One of the questions, I think this probably goes back to our evidence base, but I'll look at it. It says, how are alternative construction materials being tested, and is the testing data being published and made available?
It varies depending on what it is and where it is and who the asset owner is. There's obviously the plastic sleepers in low speed environments are being monitored. There's some near Richmond Station. There's some out in the Western stabling yards. They get monitored, and the length of the trial period varies depending on what the product is as well. So some of them can go for a number of years. And the one down in Pound Road with the carbon black, that's something that we're partnering with the Department of Transport on. So there's a monitoring regime that's established at the start of the trial, but they're generally bespoke depending on where it is, what it is, and whose is it. So it varies.
Yeah,
the short
that's
answer.
great. Yeah, okay. But also in short answer, yes, through different methodologies. I'm sure some things get fire tested, some things get
so the noise walls we had to do fire testing and all sorts of durability and chemical and
tagging.
With the plastic pipes, there's crush tests and all sorts. And the Australian Road Research Board's got a really cool facility in Port Melbourne, and they have the ability to simulate driving over something 1 million times, and a lot of testing gets done in partnership with them. So yeah, it just varies.
And Anne Morgan Paler just put a link in the Q&A for everyone who's online to the link for publications test methods ATS 4450, which obviously is one of the tests. So there you go. So anyone who's really getting into this can click on that. I'm looking at the time. We've got a little bit of time left, but at the same token, I think I'm just going to check if I've answered everyone's questions, which I have. Great. I mean, it's been a really, really informative piece. And I think one of the things I've really taken away from this session today is there is so much change happening. It is unknown. And I think the takeaway I have from that would be that so much change is possible without giving up something else.
Yes.
I mean, I always say the rhetoric with the sustainability is actually we have to prepare to give some things up, actually. But what's sort of interesting in your discussion today is that you're not really asking them to give up anything at this point. No. They can still have the road, they can still have the things. It's just, let's do it differently. Is that how you sort of feel with the work you work in?
Well, it's really funny because a lot of people say, how did you do that from inside government? How did you actually make a policy? And, 3 years later, you're already seeing the impacts. And I find it really hard to answer because we just did it. We didn't ask for permission. We just went, hey, this is important. We need to do this. And I just think anything's possible if you just think a little bit differently and don't get stuck into old ways of thinking or doing things, and everything's possible. And I think the key message from me is that, you know, we want to stimulate innovation out there. We've got massive buying power. We absolutely have a role to say, if you can make something quality out of a recycled material that reduces landfill and reduces emissions, we will 100% buy it.
Yeah, that's
And if the contractor won't buy it, we will buy it and give it to the contractor and tell them to use it.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I take from that too is that, I mean, I don't know, personally in our work, often we find the dearth of innovation has been standards. So you go, well, why we'll use recycled bitumen for this street precinct? We're like, well, no, you won't, because our council guideline says we're doing this. It's like, because we don't want to cut it up later, we'll have to replace it later. When we patch it later, we don't want to get your recycled material later. And I feel like policy is the only way to change that outcome.
Yeah. And we've changed about, I don't know, 6 or 10 specs so far. We just change them.
Yeah. So I think it's really interesting, I guess. And that's probably something the industry also needs to get better at feeding back to groups like yourself to say, actually, we've hit this roadblock because of this spec. Can you please look at this spec?
Correct.
Yeah. Otherwise, we will always hit that same.
Yeah. And, you know, reinterpretation of specifications is possible as well. Like we've got the M80 in Melbourne. I think it's the only freeway in Australia with the recycled content in every single layer of the pavement. And that didn't require a spec change. It just was a different interpretation and a bit of a technical debate with someone in the Department of Transport. So
love a technical debate. Yeah.
So it's possible.
Oh, I know they're ugly.
Excellent. I think we've answered all the questions. There's some questions around pricing, but again, I feel like that's going through the portals the right way to do that, because a lot of it is owned by individual people. It's their you know, they're selling the product back to you after they've in response to a specification call. So with that noted, is there any other lasting message you'd like to leave us all?
No, I'm happy for people to call me if they want help.
I think that's been a really beautiful part of your presentation today, is the idea that, you know, this is all there to advance and to grow things and to change the way we're doing it, and that your group are there to help and answer questions. So I think it's been heard very well by members today. So with that note, I'm conscious of everyone's time. I'd like to thank you very much for your time and your generosity. The questions have been absolutely fantastic from everyone, and your answers have been really enlightening. So thank you for spending the time today.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone online. We'll finish it up here.